Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bimmer barn. Today we're going to be working on the 335i Wagon, of course, and we need to build a transmission adapter for the rear-wheel drive transmission to fit in the X-Drive tunnel, as well as service the transmission while we're there. We're going to replace the mechatronic seals and also replace the fluids, but we can't finish installing the fluids until we start the car, so we're going to save that for later. But the big thing today is going to be building that transmission bracket. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight to work. Now, you may have already seen me service a transmission on the 335 before. I do have a couple of videos outlining how to do a fluid change and then how to do a mechatronic seal service. So today we're going to be taking care of both of those at the same time, and I'm just going to give you guys kind of a quick overview, but if you want more detail, I'll put some videos up in the corner so you guys can check those out. Now this transmission does have 200,000 miles, and you'll see us pull off the pan in a second, and judging by the color and the consistency of the fluid, it's really hard to tell, but I would really doubt if this transmission has been serviced before, especially when you see that the bolts are so corroded and such. So we're gonna go ahead and pull off this pan and make a huge mess doing so. Again, I'd recommend you guys fully drain this before you start the procedure, but obviously I made a little mistake here.
Oh my God.
Of course, on the day that I run out of blue paper towels, this happens. Just a friggin' mess. I thought that we had drained all the fluid out when we serviced the front main and the rear main seal, but I guess there was still plenty left in this transmission, enough to make a friggin' mess on the floor here. So I guess now we need to clean that up and continue with the job. Alright, so now that all that is cleaned up, we can go ahead and pull the mechatronics unit down and start replacing those sealing sleeves. Now with the pan out of the way, you see this whole mechatronics unit. It's basically all the channels the fluid flows through, and you have the solenoids, which look really colorful on the left side of the screen here. Now this thing is held in by a few, I believe it's either 10 or 13 bolts. Now, depending on which transmission you have, it could be a different number, but we're going to be replacing all of the seals for this in order to help service the transmission and also avoid any stuttering issues like we experienced on our previous 335 build. So if you're having like some stuttering between gears, or when you're in a gear at a certain speed, it feels like the revs continually drop and bounce up and down, then you might be able to solve that problem by replacing these seals preventatively before it gets worse. So here what we're doing is replacing all of them, and they are 4 different sizes. 2 of them are the same, but you really don't want to mix them up. And once you've got all those replaced, you can go ahead, throw the old ones away, and then get back to reinstalling your mechatronics unit back into the transmission. Now these bolts do have a specific tightening sequence that kind of goes from the front to the back, so you want to make sure that you follow that sequence correctly. And I used my drill to get the bolts snugged up, but then I came back with a torque wrench in order to get them all at the correct 8 Newton meters of torque. Then we're going to go ahead and replace the sleeve that seals onto the mechatronics unit so that we don't get any leak from the outside of the car. And then once we do that, we can go ahead, clip everything back into place and start reinstalling the transmission pan. These bolts are held in by 10 Newton meters, so make sure to get that torque set correctly as well, and then you'll be good to go.
Whew.
Now, I promise I'm not weak, but that bolt was really in there on the transmission, and that of course is the filler bolt for the transmission fluid. So what you see here is a Schwaben multifunction 3-liter universal bleeder system. This is great for doing brake bleeding procedures, but also you can actually fill the reservoir with any sort of fluid and use it as a positive pump to pump things into transmissions or differentials or anything like that. So we're gonna go ahead and use the liquid moly ATF that we got from this FCP Euro kit that came with all the transmission filter and fluid and everything that we needed, and we're gonna fill it up just a couple of liters into this universal bleeder system, and we're gonna get a little bit of fluid into the transmission to start. Now, you can't technically finish this procedure until you have the car started and running, because you're supposed to fill up the fluid while it's in neutral and the car is idling, but we don't want to run the transmission dry the first time that we start it, so we're gonna get a little bit of fluid in there first, and then once we get the car running, we'll be able to come back in and add more. I'll put a link to this tool down in the description below. It's really handy. It's useful for a lot of different purposes, and I would really recommend that you guys add this to your toolbox. Alright, so now with that major service knocked out on the transmission, we need to turn our attention to this problem right here. So, like many of you know, this is an X-Drive car, so a rear-wheel drive transmission does not just bolt up. It does fit over on this side. You can get 2 of the factory bolt holes to line up and mount up to the rear-wheel drive crossmember, but over on this side, they're literally hanging with nothing. Now, the factory transmission would use these 3 bolts right here to hold on, and you also see that we have a couple extra ones up here. I'm not sure what they're used for. They look dirty, so I don't think that they were used for anything before on this car. Now, my idea is that we should be able to make an adapter plate to go from these bolts and to support the transmission crossmember actually from below it instead of from above. So if we support from below, it's going to be a little bit stronger. We can use some long bolts to go through here. Now, my concern is that we will have to go around this little nub on the cross member and kind of have like a, custom template here. So I've got a good idea to tackle this problem, and let me show you what we're going to do. So what I think we're going to do is we're going to use this box here, and we're going to cut off one of the flaps. Should be big enough to use as a template, and we're going to start cutting it out, trying to make bolt holes and try to line everything up so that we have a semi-accurate representation of what the adapter plate needs to look like. So let's go ahead and disassemble this box and then start cutting things around and see if we can get something looking half decent. So we built this kind of janky looking template here for the transmission mount. It's mocked up, even got the holes drilled out for where it's going to be mounting between the chassis and the transmission mount, and that little cutout for the transmission cross member. So what we need to do now is bring this to a local metal shop and get a piece of metal that's going to be thick enough and also big enough for this piece right here, and then when we get it home, we'll be able to cut it to size and drill the holes, and hopefully we'll have this solved up in no time. So let's go ahead and head over to the metal shop and see if we can find something that's going to work for us. So we've secured this big old chunk of aluminum here, and it's a 1/4 inch thick by 6 inches wide and 28 inches long. Actually enough for me to make this thing twice over if I needed to. But the plan is we're gonna line this up along the edge here, trace it with our Sharpie, make you know, some holes for where the holes need to be, and try to cut this out using an angle grinder. Now, the reason I chose aluminum over like a stainless steel or something is obviously this is a lot lighter than a lot of any other metals. So it's gonna be lightweight, and also aluminum is gonna be easier for us to cut using the tools that we have at home, whereas like stainless steel would be really hard to drill holes through for the bolts. And I think we have enough here. It's going to be very lightweight. It is very strong. It is a 1/4 inch thick, so I'm not worried about it bending or anything. And it doesn't even have to support that much weight for the transmission. It's really negligible. So we're going to try to make a template here, cut it out, and hopefully it lines up good. So let's go ahead and start cutting this out, and then we'll test fit it on the car. Well, I wouldn't call myself a fabricator, but we're all done fabbing up this bracket here, and although we've made a complete mess here in the garage, I'd say it's worth it if this thing fits. So let's go ahead and hop into the car and see if we can get this thing to install correctly. All right, so we've got that transmission adapter mounted up, and I have to say I'm super pleased with how it came out. Really just kind of conforms to the natural curves of the tunnel and the transmission right here. And using my level on the bracket on the transmission here, you can see that it's almost 100% level. Actually, it's saying that this side that has the bracket is a little bit higher, but I'm not sure that that's so true. I can even put it on the transmission pan itself and it still says that it's level. So I think that we've got a really good mounting position for this transmission. And we even tucked away the transfer case connector right there because it looks like it goes up probably into the car. It's probably integrated into the chassis harness. And I'm not really a big fan of cutting or modifying anything that can't be undone. So for now, we're just going to tuck it away. It's zip tied and it's not going to interfere with anything. And if someone ever wants to reconvert this car to all-wheel drive, I mean, I guess they could, but I don't know why you'd want to do that. So look at that, guys. Super pleased with the result. I hope you guys are as well. And yeah, let me know what you guys think of this solution down in the comments below. So that's going to conclude our video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and I really did surprise myself with the fabrication on that little transmission bracket. I know it's not a big deal, it's just a piece of sheet metal cut into a weird size, but the fact that we were able to build it using a template and only cutting once, and you know what they say, measure twice, cut once. It came out really good. The transmission's level, and now there's just one more of those X-Drive to rear-wheel drive conversion things that we can knock off the list. Actually, I think we're all done with the X-Drive conversion. Now it's just a couple more service items, gaskets and things that we want to service before we start this car up for the first time. So stay tuned for a couple more episodes before we get it started, and then we'll have this thing driving in no time. My goal is to have it driving before the end of the year, so definitely hold me up to that goal, and hopefully we'll have it done by then. So be sure to leave a like down below and comment if you have any questions or recommendations, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new and you haven't yet. As always, I hope everyone has an awesome day, and we'll see you next time.